I'm delighted to be joined by the 2005 World Snooker Champion. It's Shaun Murphy. Shaun, first of all, the question we've got to ask everyone, and it's the most important question at the moment. I hope all your family are safe and well.
Yeah, we're doing okay, thank you. We're pushing through lockdown like everyone is, doing the best we can to adhere to all the guidelines given out each day, and yeah, we're just getting through it. Tick each day off at the end of the day and crack on with the next one. I'm actually now starting to, rather than count the days, I'm measuring lockdown in how many razor blades I go through. I'm now up to 7, so that's quite a few.
You've not thought of growing, the big beard for lockdown?
Listen, it would be one of the funniest things you've ever seen if you tried to see me grow a beard. It just wouldn't be possible. I am in desperate need of a haircut. I do. That is my biggest regret, not having a pre-lockdown trim. But listen, it's a first world problem.
Well, it is, especially, we're joking. I think if we didn't smile during this and try and have a bit of a laugh, I think we'd all go daft, wouldn't we? But
Yeah.
When you switch the TV on, I mean, certainly, I know you're over in Dublin, which is a bit different, but this is a worldwide problem, and it is horrible, isn't it?
It's just, I mean, when it first came to bear months ago, when we first heard about this virus in Wuhan, and obviously we travel to China a lot, so we may have been to Wuhan over the years. I'm not 100% sure on one of these tours of China that we do in around the ranking events that we have over there. I think all our ears pricked up as snooker players, because you think, oh, have I been there? Have I not? But I don't think any of us really envisaged we would end up where we are now, months down the line, locked in our homes, just allowed out for essential shopping, visiting old, people who need care or whatever, vulnerable elderly relatives or whatever. And, it's it's just an amazing situation. And of course, those of us that like, we're watching these Crucible classics and we're watching as much footage as we can on the TV. And I don't know if that makes it easier or harder to take the fact that the World Championships isn't on. We've got the glorious World Championship weather that always seems to shine on Sheffield at this time of year, which makes it even harder to stay in, of course. And it's just very, very challenging. And if absence does make the heart grow fonder, then there's going to be a lot of fun snooker players when this lockdown does eventually finish.
Look, we're missing lots of things, Shaun, but obviously you've mentioned it. We'd be at the Crucible right now, wouldn't we? There'd be the one table setup. We'd have the semi-finals on, which you've obviously experienced on a number of occasions. Let's look back and try and put a smile on our face for the next few minutes. So, what is it about the Crucible? Why is the Crucible just this iconic sporting venue? Because it shouldn't be. I mean, it was built for Shakespeare, wasn't it? Not for World Championship tussles.
I think a few years ago, a couple of us looked into what the word crucible actually means, and it goes back to the old days of like almost a big pot, a melting pot. And the crucible's actually sort of shaped that way. When you're on the floor, the seating's quite steep, and it's been built obviously for plays and theatrical performances, but it's been designed to create atmosphere. And we put a lot of temporary setups into sort of arenas around the world, and sometimes you get a bit lost. We were at the Wembley Arena for a brief period of time, and although we had something near 2,000 seats there, it was just lost in a 10,000 seater auditorium. The Crucible just seems to work because it's been designed to create atmosphere and pressure and situations like you experience in the snooker. But when you see it with 2 tables in it and the 4 cameramen and the divider, you know yourself, you just think, how does this work? Someone on the front row, if they wanted, could reach out and push a player while he's playing off the side cushions or something. It just, and the cameramen find it difficult, and it's just, you think, wow, this only just goes in. But certainly when it goes down to just the one table, it's just is the home of snooker then. And it's where every player, no matter who they are, it's where they all dream of playing one day.
It's a long tournament. It's 17 days. It's a marathon. But do you think when we go to the one table on the Thursday, normally when the semi-finals start, do you feel like, right, the tournament's properly begun now?
I mean, Stephen Hendry used to say that. I mean, he was there just year after year after year after year. He said that the tournament for him didn't really start until the semi-finals. So I guess really, like, you know, I think you're only just about halfway in terms of frames needed when you get to the semis. It's mad to think that you get to the semi-finals of an event and there's so much more play still to go. You know, possibly 8 sessions of snooker left, 4 sessions in the semi, another 4 in the final if you're lucky enough to get there. You know, it really is a marathon of the mind. And yeah, I mean, you know, we're all just desperate for this situation we're all in to lift. And, you know, hopefully in a few months' time, if things go as they are currently planned, you know, there'll be 4 very lucky people in that semi-final.
Well, Barry Hearn has said that we've got the dates penciled in for the 31st of July. He's quite clear it's got to be on the government advice as well. It's got to be authorised. And he's saying he's hopeful for the crowd or reduced crowd or behind closed doors. Now, I think possibly the behind closed doors might be more realistic. What would it be like playing behind closed doors, do you think, at the Crucible, Shaun?
Well, I mean, nobody wants that. You know, that just from a player's point of view, nobody wants that. People have spent their money on tickets. People come every year. We want to play in front of an audience who wants to watch us. That's what we want. But I think over and above that, that this World Championship has to be played, because not necessarily to crown a winner and, you know, the fanfare and everything that goes with winning the World Championship, but for the guys down on the sort of the bottom end of the rankings, fighting at the 64 spaces, looking for their tour survival, tour cards for next year. Players have already earned the right to be on the tour next season. Will players be relegated? All of that has to be answered. And the way to answer that is to play the World Championship. So, unfortunately, for 1 year only, I think we're all going to have to just accept that it isn't going to be played in an ideal fashion, but it does have to be played. Those guys down at the bottom of the rankings, and as I say, in that 64-man fight for a tour card, they've earned the right to fight it out. They've earned their right to say, no, we're playing for our place. And that's why the championship has to go ahead.
And as well, come the end of July, it might provide a real tonic. I mean, the BBC are up for it as well. Eurosport are up for it. So it might just provide a real tonic for the viewing public.
Well, I just think the crowd and the fans out there around the world would just get so behind the event, because we're all desperate for some live sport now. You know, and that's before you start talking about the end of July. Listen, that's a long way away, and life has changed almost beyond all recognition in the last few weeks. The start date of July 31st is a long way away by comparison. A lot could change, and I think we all just have to hope that it gets better, but we also all have to do our part, and we all have to do what we can to minimise the spreading of this virus.
Yeah, spot on. Stay in and stay safe. It's a clear message for all of us, isn't it? Right, I'm going to take you back to a lot happier times now, then. 2005, you were a qualifier that year. You were 150 to 1. So, look, your first round match, did you honestly think, right then, I can win the World Championship?
No, definitely not. I mean, I'd played at the Crucible twice before that, in 2002 and 2003. I got pumped by Stephen Hendry on my debut 10-4. And then I lost on the black ball in a deciding frame to Ken Doherty the following year, 10-9. Didn't qualify in 04. So when I did qualify in 05, I was just like, you know, wouldn't it be nice just to win a match at the Crucible? Forget winning the tournament. Let's just try and win a match. But there was a backstory to it, in as much as I'd had such a bad season, and, you know, it cost me and my family so much, this snooker journey, from being an 8-9-year-old boy, that I'd just reached the end of my tether with snooker, and I'd actually given up. I'd actually decided that was going to be my last tournament, and we'd see where my life took me. I'd gone and inquired about getting a job selling cars at Mercedes-Benz in Sheffield, and the guy there had said, well, you know, we'll start you out and see how you go, get this snooker thing out of the way, and come and start selling cars. Of course, what happened happened. And the next time I went in to see him, I went in to buy a car. And it was just a mad few weeks. But when I turned up at the Crucible that year with my coach, Steve Prest, in my corner, who's sadly no longer with us, we were just trying to win a match. And my victory over Chris Small in the first round that year was just, it was something I'll never, ever forget. That first taste of victory at the Crucible was something I dreamed of from being a young child.
So after winning that first round, did you feel like, well, anything else is just a bonus now then?
Yeah, completely. And I walked into John Higgins, who I fully expected to lose to, because he was my nemesis. So, I mean, I was ranked, 48th in the world. Everyone was my nemesis. But every time I got to a personal best in a tournament, it didn't matter where it was or what it was. I think it was the last 16 of the LG Cup. He beat me. The semi-finals of the British Open that season was a personal best. He beat me 6-0, didn't see a ball. So I walked into him at the Crucible second round, first 13, and I just think, well, there's no way I can get to 13 before John. And there was one moment during the match where I had him in all sorts of trouble, and I forced him into a shot which he missed, and he banged his cue on the floor really hard, which wasn't like John. And the crowd, it was like a pantomime. The crowd all went, woo, like that. And I remember thinking, it sat in my chair thinking, got him here, got him. He's under pressure. And there's not many times that you could say that of a legend like John Higgins, but I definitely had him under pressure. I just think he was fully expected to beat me, just to swap me aside, because I was a nobody. And it's not as easy to do that out there, especially in the Crucible. And when I got past him, sure, now you're into the quarterfinals and there's only 8 players left. You think you start to look at things a bit more seriously. Then you think, well, there's only 8 players here now, and let's give it our best. But yeah, you're right. It was more of a just absolutely nothing to lose at that stage, nothing to lose at all. And certainly didn't see myself going on to win the tournament, I have to say.
If you were inexperienced at the Crucible, your route to the final after the first round, you played obviously past winners, didn't you? And John Higgins, who'd won it in '98. Yeah. Then Steve Davis in the quarterfinal. Obviously, we all know about Steve Davis winning it 6 times. And then Peter Ebdon in the semi-final. So, yeah, look, I know it's difficult to get to a world final, but you had a very difficult route as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I don't think nobody could say that I was, given the title. No one made it easy for me. I beat 3 past champions along the way and a double finalist in Matthew Stevens in the final. So, I feel like I earned it. But of course, there was always the thing in the back of my mind that, I played Peter in the semi-finals. And that was the day after that infamous match with Ronnie he had in the quarterfinals. And I have to admit, I was definitely in Peter's corner for that match because, playing Peter Ebdon, with all due respect to every player, I'd much rather have played Peter than Ronnie. And when Peter did, I was sort of doing a celebration dance around the lounge because, my chances of winning went through the roof.
But, I mean, you'd obviously only won 1 match in the first round, then beat Higgins, beat Davis. Peter had been in a final against Hendry, hadn't he, in '96, I think. Won it in 2002. So he had far more experience of a one-table setup.
Oh, completely. And he was by far and away expected to win. I grew up in Northamptonshire where he based himself for his whole professional life. So it's somebody I'd known from being a young boy. And, he really helped me in my young career. He influenced me a lot. He was a massive inspiration. So to walk out to play him in the semi-finals of the World Championships that year was unbelievable, really. But I remember I didn't cope with it very well at all. I think after the first session, I want to say 7-1 or maybe 6-2 behind. Just like a, rabbit in the headlights, just couldn't breathe. But in the end, I rallied to 12 each after the third session and came out for the fourth session. I think I won all 5 frames to get over the line 17-12. And it was just as I say, I mean, it's a long time ago now, but I remember that session very, very well. And it was just a mad fortnight, really, where, everything I looked at went in. They've been few and far between those weeks ever since, but that was a mad week and something I'll never, ever forget.
So can you remember how you felt before the final against Matthew Stevens?
well, I mean, you can imagine, like, 22 years of age, only ever been to one semi-final of a ranking event previously, never played at any of the majors. It was just, everyone in my corner was just saying, well, just treat it like another game of snooker, just do your thing, just concentrate. All of those sporting cliches that everyone comes out with. Everyone's an expert, aren't they, at that stage? But it was very difficult. And I remember going out there and, again, just really struggled with it. And I was 10-6 behind overnight, I think, during the final.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I was lucky and did well to be 10-6. It really should have been more. I was struggling with the most simplest of shots. Couldn't think straight, couldn't make good, clear decisions, was playing safe when I should have been going for a shot, was going for a long red when I should have been playing safe. I was just getting all these things wrong. And I remember going to bed that night being very deflated. I'd worked so hard. You start believing things are going to happen. You get on this crest of a wave. You're the young qualifier. You got to the final. Everyone's saying you're going to win. And now you're 10-6 behind and probably going to lose. And it all felt a bit, oh, this has all been for nothing. But when I got up the following morning, I don't know why no one said anything to me. I just felt like, no, I'm not going to give up here. I've come all this way, and I'm not going to give him these 8 frames. He's going to have to win these 8 frames. The upbringing I had, the village I grew up in, was a very sort of hard-working area. People didn't have very much. I didn't grow up with a lot of things at all, and I wasn't prepared to just hand over this opportunity. Like, I was going to stand there and fight all day if necessary. So much so, I don't think we completed all our allocation of frames in the 3rd session. I think we got pulled off 1 frame early. So dour was I, so prepared to get in the trenches with him and fight for every frame. We didn't even finish all the 8 frames. And then I vividly remember coming out for the final session, because it was the last Embassy World Championship. They had all the past winners there. Which, as I say, as a real sort of historian and a lover of snooker, the procession of champions, like literally everyone who was still alive at the time who was a champion or a past champion was there. And it was all too much. I remember just, thinking I've got to now play snooker now in front of these people who I know are in the players' lounge upstairs, criticising, what's he played there? What's he done this for? And it took me a while to settle that night, I have to say.
If the final was dour at times, in your own words, I think it was more of a scrap at times, wasn't it? But you turned on a style at the end, 16 all, and then you rattled in a 97 and an 83 to become world champion.
Yeah, I think that you can put that you can file that under the innocence of youth, or ignorance is bliss. I just didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really grasp the magnitude of what I was doing. I've watched it back a few times, and some of the shots I attempted in those few frames were just madness, complete madness. But they went in. There was a black in what turned out to be the last frame along the cushion, which was just ridiculous. To even consider going for that shot at that stage was mad. There was a couple of shots in the previous frame where I played a rest shot, splashed all the reds everywhere. Anything could have happened and it went in. And there was, shots like that throughout the whole tournament. And I have to say, as I've gone through peaks and troughs in my career since, I've often rewatched that match and thought, that was my biggest success, really. And I got it through playing that way. So maybe there's something in it. And, there have been times where I've revisited that mentality of going for my shots. If you think, I was always brought up, if you think you can get it, go for it. So maybe there's something in it.
In that final break of 83, can you remember at what point you thought, right, I am world champion now, I am world champion?
Well, it's funny because when you do watch it back, the ball that won me the tournament, I think, was the penultimate red or something. And weirdly enough, I remember being really calm on that shot because it was a shot that I'd hit thousands upon thousands of times since being 8 years of age, the shot to win the World Championships. I'd practiced that shot in different guises, in different forms, as a young boy on my 6-foot table to a 12-year-old in the club, playing against yourself, using your imagination. I'd potted that ball to win the championship of the world thousands of times. So when it came, I was actually quite calm on it. I was like, right, we've done this before, pot it. But what you can see when you watch it back, you see the look on my face. I didn't have a clue what to do after that. I hadn't thought about what to do next. And then I obviously had to pot another ball, and then another one and another one. And you can say, I look back now and think, you should have really enjoyed that a bit more. There wasn't, I didn't crack a smile. I was just too, I was overcome. It was too much for me to cope with. Now I'd be giving it the fist now. I'd be giving it the come on and jumping around the table. But, back then I didn't know the ropes. I didn't know how to celebrate victory. That's the thing about life, Mark, that there's lots of these self-help books about, getting better, dealing with disappointment, dealing with negative. There's not many books on how to cope with success and how to handle when things go right. There's lots of things on how to handle it when it goes wrong. But no one had ever told me, well, when it goes right, this is what you do.
Well,
and,
Shaun, to be fair, not many people become world champions. There's not many people who could write that book. You could. Now, you were only 22. Was it shock then, do you think?
I was complete shock. I think I was the second youngest to ever win it.
Yeah.
And as I say, having been there, the first time I went there was as a 9-year-old boy. Went up again, as I said earlier on, Peter Ebdon was such an influential character in the area I grew up in. He was Mr. Snooker, certainly in Northants when he turned pro in the early 90s. So at 1992, as a 9-year-old, we all schlepped up the M1 to go and watch him make his debut against Steve Davis, where he peppered Davis 10-4. Now, I had a poster of Steve Davis on my wall at that age, and I was like over the moon for the local guy who beat Steve Davis, but on the other hand, was in tears that my idol had lost. And it was something, obviously, when Peter announced his retirement there, I rang Peter and sort of told him the story, and we had a good laugh about it. And it's been an honour to become one of Peter's friends over the years, because at that age he was someone I looked up to as a real inspirational figure. He was the local pro playing at the Crucible on the tour. He epitomised what I wanted to be. And so I used to ring him all the time, practiced with him as much as I could. And I must now, pay tribute to him and say thank you for that, because he really gave me a lot of time and experience. Even sometimes when he didn't know it, even just the way he was, the way he carried himself, all of that information was going in. And a very great career. And I wish him all the best in anything he goes into in the future.
Yeah, obviously Peter announced his official retirement yesterday. Another former world champion like yourself, and look, he was fantastic at the Crucible. He was another fighter at the Crucible, wasn't he?
Oh, he was just he didn't know when he was beaten, and that is the mark of a champion. The match is over when I shake your hand and not before. And he sort of really epitomised that. He embodied that. He wouldn't give up at all, and he went through his hell-raising, shouting at everything phase. Getting very G'd up with the crowd. Fist pumping every pot almost for a couple of years, to then very calm and being very sort of cautious around the table. His game changed and morphed over the years, and as he evolved as a man. And but you talk about people, you wouldn't find anyone in snooker, nobody in snooker, with a bad word to say about Peter Ebdon. And I think that's the mark of the man.
Now, you mentioned the 9-year-old boy that used to practice and put in the final ball to win the world championship. Who were you playing then?
Yeah, it was always Steve Davis. I must have beat Steve Davis in the final of the World Championship 100,000 times. As a 10-year-old boy, he must have been sick of the sight of me, Steve. But no, in all seriousness, I mean, it was all about, and I didn't understand it at that stage. But now you look back, Chris Henry, my coach, and I, we're now practicing. We're finding ways of practicing, trying to recreate the pressure that you feel out there in the arena to make that practice, really worthwhile. But I was doing that 30 years ago, and literally standing there going, right, take these last 2 reds, 2 colours, and clear the colours for the World Championships. It suddenly becomes quite difficult, that, without going into it too much, but like your brain, your subconscious doesn't know the difference between something imagined and something that's real. Can't tell the difference. So as a 9-year-old, when I was stood there going, all right, pop this red, pop the black, another red, another, clear the colour, you've won the World Championships. It's just going in. It was just going in. And as I say, the calmest I felt for the whole event in 2005, from round 1 to the final, was stood over that ball that actually won me the tournament. Now, it was a ball that was fairly easy, and it was a ball that I should pot, of course. But they do have to be potted, and thankfully it went in.
When did it sink in then, being world champion? If it didn't sink in then, when did it? Was it a few days later, or half an hour later, or the next morning when you woke up and thought, wow, I am the best snooker player in the world, world champion?
Well, as you can imagine, after the World Championships, there's a bit of a hefty celebration. But that night, there's a very long sort of party and stuff. As I said before, it was the last Embassy Championship of the world, and they put on a massive party, as you can imagine. And I don't think any of us got any sleep that night. But I remember a few days later having a dream that I'd got to the final and not won the championship. And I remember waking from the dream being very disappointed, because I felt as if I'd imagined the whole last few days. And I came downstairs really disappointed, thinking, well, that's a mountain I've got to climb. I really want to achieve that. And I got a drink from the kitchen and came through the lounge, and there was the trophy in the lounge. And for that brief 10 minutes of waking up, not really knowing what day it was, I'd completely forgotten that 3 days before I'd won the World Championships. It was mad times. But I think it took a long time for it to sink in what winning the World Championship means. I think this goes for any of the major championships, frankly, but the World Championships is obviously the king of them all. You're recognised in the street. You go from being completely, in the shadows to thrust into the limelight. The viewing figures for the final were, I think, the highest they've been ever since. Maybe one match has since gone past it in the World Championships, but nearly 8 million people watched it live that night. So that's a significant number. And you don't realise, you could stood in the petrol station or in the shops and everyone thinks they know you, So you went from complete anonymity to being known by a lot of people. That took some getting used to. That was very, very strange. But I guess that comes with performing on TV at the end of the day. But again, no one teaches you how to handle these things. No one tells you, what to say, what not to say. And back then, I was susceptible to the odd rash comment in my early 20s. I did say a few things that I wish I could get in a time machine and give myself a shake. Don't say that. Don't say that. That could have really done with a bit of help a few years ago. I'm a bit more mellowed these days. I'm a bit more rounded, but I used to say things, and I wish I could go back and erase a few of those, but obviously I can't. But it was. I think it was when you started getting invited to certain things. I got invited to a lot of big corporate events, charity events, and I think that year or the year after, I thought it was a few weeks after winning the World Championship, I got invited to the Sir Bobby Robson Golf Classic in Portugal with, all of the Premier League stars, actors and actresses from films and soaps. And so, my mum would have watched every episode of Corrie and EastEnders for 50 years. So now I'm having a drink in the bar with her favourite actor, and you've gone from, as I say, a lad from a very working class town in Northamptonshire to being champion of the world. It was weird. But I think it was probably around then that it started to sink in, what it meant.
You said you were going to jack snooker in and you were going to go and work in a garage. So after winning the World Championship, did you go back and go to the garage then, did you?
I did. I bought my car from them. As a child, my dad in my early years had worked for Mercedes-Benz, and so I had 3 goals for myself. As a 10-year-old boy, I set 3 challenges. One was to be world champion, one was to be world number 1, and the other was to own a Mercedes Benz. And that 17 days at the World Championships achieved 2 of those. I've still not been to the top of the rankings. That's something I'm still chasing. That's still what gets me out of bed and gets me to the club. Coronavirus notwithstanding, but that's the thing I'm still chasing. But after the World Championships, I went back in, and of course the guy that managed the dealership that obviously knew all about it. It was all over the press. They're in the area, and I lived in Sheffield at the time. It was a big deal, and I went in and instead of selling a car, bought a car. That ticked off goal number 2.
Do you think you'd have been any good at selling cars?
No, absolutely not. I'd be the worst salesman ever. If someone would come in, I'd say, "Do you want to buy the car?" No, great, see you later. I wouldn't be any good at it at all. I'd be too punchy and too to the point. There'd be too many tire kickers for me.
2009 was your next final. John Higgins didn't give you a chance to do that final.
Not really. That's the final. That's the final that I really look back and think that was a real wasted opportunity. Really, on one hand, it's easy to say John just throws me out in the final, which is true. He was far and away more tactically astute than I was in the final, and he saw weaknesses in my defensive game, and he exposed them for 2 days and ran away with the match. But because of that, these world finals don't come around very often, I should say. And I look back at that one as an opportunity missed, really, and that was the one really that I didn't really feature in the match, and so disappointing because I'd worked so hard that year. I'd had a really good season. I'd won the UK Championships, and I think really to the final, certainly that year, I think I was the best player in the tournament. We'd stood a barrage from Hendry in I think the second round or the quarterfinals, where he had a 147. So I had Stephen Hendry in full flight and beat Marco Fu with a session to spare. I was playing some really good stuff. We'd stood a massive comeback from Robertson in the semis, and then really just didn't turn up in the final. I think John and I were level pegging after the first session at 4 frames each. And then that night, the Sunday night in the final, I just didn't turn up. Whether I'd run out of steam or just played some bad shots that got exposed, I can't really remember. But I think I lost that session 7-1. And so to be 11-5 down overnight against someone like John Higgins, the match is pretty much over really at that stage. And it was disappointing really. And for me, the tournament kind of fizzled out a little bit towards the end. It was a real shame because I just couldn't, I just wasn't strong enough to break him down then. I'm still not in the same league as John Higgins tactically, but I'm a lot better today than I was then. And again, if I could have a time machine, if I could borrow a time machine for a few hours, I'd go back to the young Shaun Murphy and give him a good slap round the face and tell him to stop being such an idiot. And then I'd also go to 2009 and say, don't go for that silly shot. Just play safe. Just wait. Just wait. Don't be so reckless. This is the world final. But we have to live with those things.
2015, you were playing great in that tournament as well. And in the final, you were 8-4 up.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. The thing I have to say about that final, though, is that I don't remember throwing it away. I don't feel like I lost that final. I feel like Stuart won it. I thought we both played incredibly well to a very high standard. I think there was something like 30, 50 or 60 breaks in 33 frames of snooker played. What a final we put on. And, I look back quite proud to have been a part of that match. Obviously, it's always tinged with disappointment of coming second in the World Final. There's no question about that, of course. But I don't remember throwing it away. I was 8-4 up. I think we had an interval. and I came out and just tried to push on. I remember thinking, right, we'll just push on, take one frame at a time, and see where we end up overnight. And I think I edged. Ended up being ahead overnight by just a frame. It felt like I was behind because Stuart had all the momentum. But as I say, I don't really remember it being like, I was in and missed my opportunities all the time and threw the match away. I think Stuart deserves full credit for how he played in that match and in that tournament. And, earlier you mentioned about how I'd earned my run to the final in 05, taking out 3 champions. Stuart, on his way to winning the championship in 15, I think he took out 4 former world champions. Sorry, no, 3. He beat Robbie Williams, then he beat Graham Dott, Ronnie O'Sullivan, Judd Trump, and myself. So I think he deserved it,
No, look, it was a great fun. I remember at 15 all, it could have gone either way as well. And I remember afterwards, you've been very, very gracious. And you were actually delighted for Stuart Bingham because you said,
I was,
to win a title at 38 and to have played so many years and so hard on the circuit.
Absolutely. I mean, Stuart had chased that dream, as we all have. We've all had that dream from being young children. And I think no matter who it is who stood in the other corner, I think you're always pleased that they've achieved something that they've put their life and soul into. So, yeah, I was pleased to Stuart, as I was pleased to John, in 09, because that is our Everest. And as players have proven in years gone by, it's not easy to win the World Championships. There are some great players who've played at that venue and for 30 or 40 years or more that have never won the world title. And it just goes to show how difficult it is. So, I look back at 2015, I played some of my best snooker of my life during that fortnight and came up 3 frames short of winning the World Championships. That's just unfortunate. That's the way it goes.
Before this awful virus, you were in good form as well, weren't you? Won the Welsh Open, semis of the German Masters, semis of the Player Championship. I mean, it's only a small thing with what's going on, but that must be personally very frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I've made some changes to my game on the table with Chris. We've made a few little technical tweaks, which we've seen the results of, and that's been very encouraging. It's been the first season I've won 2 ranking events in the same season. And my level of consistency has been very high. I've, generally played really good stuff, in most events I've played in. There haven't been many weeks where I've not really turned up. I guess really the low point of the season would probably be the UK Champs, where, I lost to Eden Sharaf in the first round, just played out of his boots. He played a great best of 11 and he got to 6 before I did. It was no disgrace there. Full credit to Eden. He played out of his boots, as I say. But yeah, all of this coronavirus stuff has kind of put a freeze on the season, but it's put a freeze on it for everybody. And I suppose when things do when these restrictions do start being lifted, when things become a little bit more loose, then we'll all be trying to get back into wherever we practice. And there are some players who are very lucky who have tables at home. And it'll be interesting to see how much better prepared those players are versus everyone else. People who haven't had to stop practicing, they've had these last few months completely to themselves, practiced as much as they want. They're definitely going to have a head start on everyone else. And the other thing, which I think hasn't been mentioned yet, or if it has, I've missed it, is that if the World Championships is played behind closed doors at the Crucible, how much will that change the advantage that the seeded players normally have? Because they're the ones who are used to performing. They're used to playing there in front of packed houses and all the rest of it. Take that element away. Will that level the playing field, somewhat? Now, I think we've seen the playing field has been leveled over the last few years anyway, just by the general standard on show. The strength in depth across the tour is the strongest it's ever been. So maybe that home advantage, if that's the right term, for the top seeded players who are used to playing at the Crucible, maybe that doesn't count for as much anymore. But it certainly won't count for as much playing in front of nobody. That element of walking out in front of packed arenas around, and being able to perform, that's something that sets the top players apart. That's why they're at the top, because they're able to do that when they have to. So if you take that element of it away, then I think that brings in a lot of potential upsets and a lot more potential winners of the tournament.
Well, Shaun, I've loved speaking to you. I've loved the insight into winning and your honesty as well about those other two finals. But one final question for you then. So it's quite clear, listening to you, that Shaun Murphy is going absolutely nowhere, and you will try your absolute damn hardest to add to that world title championship.
Absolutely. I mean, as I say, what gets me out of bed is trying to get to the top of the rankings. And also, there's a very, very small group of people who've won the world championships. And there's an even smaller group of people who've won it more than once. And, I've had 2 shots at adding to my collection in 09 and 15. And, in the form that I've shown this season and the work that I know I've been putting in, I know I'll get to the Crucible. If we're lucky enough to play there this year at some stage, I'll get there ready, and I'll be trying as hard as anyone to take that trophy back to Dublin.
And I've got some more good news for you. You are still my daughter's favourite snooker player.
Well, we shared enough breakfasts back in 2015 at the hotel, didn't we? So that's something that's special. Listen, and it's things like that, Mark, isn't it, that really hit home with us, because people tune in and they see the snooker and there's winners and there's losers, but behind closed doors, we're all one big family, really. Without me being too cheesy about it, we are one big family. We do get to see everyone's kids and families at venues and hotels, and you see the same people at breakfast, and you actually become to get to know people, and that's part of what makes the World Championships the festival of snooker it is, isn't it? Because we all get to, how have you been this year, and what have you been up to, and this, that, and the other, and it's great. And I really hope that things do work out and we do get to be back there soon, and hopefully I'll be your daughter's favourite player for many more years to come.
Shaun Murphy, thanks ever so much for your time.